welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Panhandle. This is a new television series that was dropped by Spectrum TV. Now, I was not aware that Spectrum actually created their own content. I knew that they were like a cable provider. I worked for them for a very brief amount of time, but I didn't know that they had like their own streaming service or anything of that nature. I didn't work in that part of the company, but Panhandle, I'm not sure if that is the first series that they have dropped or if they have a lot more of them and I am just not clued in. I'll have to do some research, but the fact that this comes from Spectrum Television kind of clears up some things for me. Like the cast list looks very D-grade. It's not the fancy one that like IMDb has typically where you can see the pictures of the actors and all of that good stuff. Like it definitely looks like someone did this on their computer at home and just plugged it onto the internet. But Panhandle, basically after watching the first episode, because the first episode is all that I've gotten through so far, it is 100% without a question just a copy and paste of the show Monk that came out like a decade ago with Tony Shalhoub, but minus the awesomeness of Tony Shalhoub. So it's exactly the same story. There are some very minor tweaks to the story that change it up a little bit, but basically verbatim, if you've seen Monk, you've already seen Panhandle. So the premise of Panhandle is this character named Bell Prescott, played by Luke Kirby, and he is what I would call a rich Southern boy. Now, of course, this takes place in the Florida Panhandle. It is in a city where apparently there are no police. There is only one police officer for the entire county, and she handles everything. And if something big happens, like she has to call in the big guns from like a different county. I am not familiar enough with Florida to know if this is realistic or a thing that takes place normally, but it seems sort of sketch considering. But so basically Bell Prescott, his wife met an untimely demise, and ever since then, he has agoraphobia, i.e. he is afraid to leave his own property. So he has like a very large plantation property is what I would consider it. And he cannot go past like the front gate of this plantation property. But being on this giant plantation property seems no problem. Like he can leave the house and he can walk around just fine, but he just can't leave the gate, which, no offense, sounds pretty great to me. I don't know if I would need to be agoraphobic in order to just live in a big, fancy, rich mansion and never leave. But either way, I don't know exactly how long or how much time is meant to have passed since his wife's death. I think they might have mentioned it in the first episode and I just wasn't paying attention. But he basically hasn't left this property since she was in this accident. Now, in the first episode, he stumbles upon a dead body of a man in his front yard who he knows. He is aware of who this person is. He calls the police. This woman, who is the only police officer, comes by and tries to help, and immediately, like, she's not allowed, I guess, to handle murder investigations, so she has to call in, like, the bigwigs to come and handle this investigation. And because it's a smaller county, they are kind of taking their sweet-ass time to get there. So Bell Prescott, this main character, takes it upon himself to move the body, to touch the body, to ruin basically the entire scene where the body is found. So I'm confused how anybody plans to, like, actually run an investigation for this murder. Not only that, but I feel like in reality, you would definitely have, charges pressed against you for disturbing a crime scene. Not to mention that this body is found on his property, like within the gates of his property. So would you not be suspect numero uno that you want to just go around putting your fingerprints all over this body and all over the weapons and yada yada? Anyway, I digress. So when this policewoman arrives, shows her like this barn or some sort of structure like that where he has basically done this connect the dots of several murders or things that have happened in this county, including his wife's murder and how he's like tied them together. It kind of looks like one of those boards that you'll normally see in any kind of crime TV show where they have like the string and the pins that are pinning this guy to that guy. And you know what I'm talking about. So he's got one of those and is basically trying to say that like all of these recent happenings are connected to one another. But Panhandle, for me, it just like for some reason it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit. Like with Monk, for one, it was funny, whereas Panhandle just didn't land as funny to me. I guess maybe because I'd already seen Monk and I already loved Monk. And so like the jokes are different and not done as well, or with Tony Shalhoub's impeccable like ability. So it kind of just like gave me knockoff vibes, like Wish, like the Wish version of Monk. And Monk, at least, like Tony Shalhoub's character, used to be in law enforcement. So it made sense as to like why he could come in and help with these cases. Whereas Panhandle is just some rich dude. Like he has, I think, no prior, I don't know if he was like working with the cops before. I missed a lot of things because I like basically once I understood what was going on, I was like, oh, it's Monk. And my brain just kind of checked out and stopped paying attention. Like, and a lot of the things in here were a little bit silly. Like the police officer that is with him is very, well, she would be the trashiest police officer I've ever seen. And again, I don't know if this is like typical of Florida, because I know everybody always makes fun of Florida, like, oh, Florida man, or oh, that's typical Florida weirdness. So I don't know if this is a show that would cater to people like more so from Florida that's like, that's funny because it's true. Whereas I don't quite get it because I don't live there. I've only visited Florida once. I was in Miami for like maybe 2 days. So none of this like hits for me. None of it rings a bell as being like realistic or funny because it's true. And the police officer, to me, like she's flirting with people that she's pulled over on the side of the road, for speeding and stuff. She's answering phone calls. I think her phrase or whatever, every single time she answers a phone call, because all of the like 911 dispatch, I guess, is going to her personal cell phone, and she answers it, is this an emergency or do you just have something stuck up your butt? And again, I don't know if this is just Florida or if that, like, if a police officer answered the phone that way, I would be very perturbed, to say the least, especially because the time that she does answer that, it is a call about this particular murder. So I don't know. Something about this seems like they're definitely trying to match like the funny humor of the television show Monk. And it's basically the exact same premise, but it falls short for me. I don't know. I think once House of the Dragon is over and once Serpent Queen ends, like Panhandle seems like something I might circle back to as like background noise or a television show that just sort of gets you through until the better shows are back on. But this one is not one that I would expect to see a second season of. I don't know. And I don't know if it gets better like past episode 1 because I've only watched the first episode, but I would rather, I guess, go back and just watch old seasons of Monk because Tony Shalhoub, people, like, I don't know why you would ever try and copycat him. It's never gonna work. It's never gonna work. But those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.